Hello everybody, I'm AP. Some of you have worked with me and some of you have never met me, but we're going to talk today about 4 tips for distance education. So I have worked in distance education for a lot of years. I started out teaching online before that was really a thing that a lot of people did, and I learned so much there. And I also have an MED in curriculum and instructional design, and I am super passionate about helping schools make educational technology part of their regular curriculum and not a separate entity. So let's talk today, amidst all this craziness, about how you can maintain some semblance of normality in your classroom while you move it to distance education. We're going to use 4 tips to do that because that's how we do things now with lists, and hopefully keep it compartmentalized and manageable for you. So the first thing I want you to think about is privacy. And we think about this a lot in our classrooms when we deal with paper, but sometimes when we move to digital, there are things that we don't think about. So I want you to think about data, images, and audio. I've seen lots of recommendations for using video conferencing to keep in touch with your students, and that can be a great engagement tool. But what I want you to think about there is what's going on in the background for both you and your students. So at your house, you have a little more control over what's going on. Or if you're still working from your classroom at school, you have the ultimate control over what's going on. But you still want to think about who might be passing behind you. And then in your student's home, you don't know who's going to be doing the bathroom to bedroom sprint, or who might be walking past with an inappropriate t-shirt on, or maybe a TV in the background with inappropriate images. Those are all things that I've seen happen. So you want to be mindful of those things if you're going to use video conferencing, and just make sure you set clear expectations and that you think of those things ahead of time. You also want to remember that some of your students, especially your K-6 kids, their filter is sometimes a little bit broken when it comes to good decision making. Where are my 3rd grade teachers at? So what would have been a passing moment in your classroom can now be screenshotted or distributed as a recording to be remembered forever. So with just as you would in the classroom, you want to differentiate for your students and think about who might really struggle to make good decisions on a webcam, and also think about setting ground rules for recording or screenshotting anything you're sharing. Past that, let's think about data and audio. So audio has a lot of the same rules as visual. You want to just make sure that you're not recording student personal information or things that could be used to identify them in a recording that might accidentally be distributed. And you also want to make sure that you have the same issues you do with video, that there's not things in the background that shouldn't be. For data, I want you to think about, would you hand it over on a piece of paper to someone to walk out of your building with? And would you allow someone to store it in a file cabinet at their headquarters? So there are so many really cool free tools out there that can make distance learning more engaging and more fun. But when you sign your students up for those services, you want to investigate the company a little bit, make sure they're reputable, and make sure that they're going to be using your data in ways that are congruent with your district and school guidelines. And really imagine yourself handing your student list or other information that you're uploading to the program over to that person on a piece of paper. And then you have to remember they're going to be keeping it there so that they can serve you and your students. So when you visit their website or investigate the company, just think about that before you upload your student list or share that data. And as always, you're going to want to be careful that you're following your school and district guidelines on that. Usually schools will post that on their website or in your employee handbook, so you can check there for that information. So enough of the boring stuff about staying safe. Let's talk about the fun stuff, which is how we're actually going to do this instruction. A lot of times we go immediately to digital and online tools, which are amazing, but there are ways to collaborate offline as well. One thing you can do is to ask students to each complete a piece or a part of a project that they'll bring back together I know of one teacher that is having students all complete part of a project and then drop it off at the library, which is closed right now, but the librarians will be assembling that into a bigger project. So each student is assigned part of a city to build with guidelines that are based on some of their state standards. So they're using some of their math standards and some of their social studies standards to each build part of this city, and then they're going to drop it off at the library and the librarians will assemble it. So you don't have to do it online. You can use offline collaboration. If you do decide to go online, and webcams or synchronous sessions aren't an option, consider using tools that allow you to use collaboration instruments that live in the cloud that students can visit on their own. So if you're going to do that, here are a few things that I found very helpful. You want to start with questions, not directions. I'm going to show you an example that one teacher did. I'm going to turn off my camera and I'll be right back and show this to you. All right, so this is an example of a collaborative social studies document, and this one is completed in Lucidchart. And the teacher asked the question, why did America win the Revolutionary War? And each of these arms is completed by a different student who's working on a different piece of the question. So you can assign students to go in and work asynchronously on this document, which can be shared, and they can add their findings to the boxes. Another thing to think about when you're working synchronously or asynchronously is, does the program give you a way to track who left comments in case someone decides to be witty or hilarious and use profanity or bathroom humor? And this particular tool does allow for that in the paid version, and lots of other tools also have something like that where you can go back and track use, which brings me to my next point when you're using collaborative tools. You want to lay the ground rules before you make an assignment like this. So just like in your regular school day, you want to give a time frame for when they should log in and use the tool. And you also want to give guidelines about what's expected. For example, how many comments or items they're expected to post or participate with, and if they're expected to source them or use scholarly sources. Depending on your grade levels and standards, you want to think about all of that. And then you want to spell those out really carefully and clearly, just like you would in the classroom. And then you want to remind them that you really can see all. You'll see the entire document and you'll know who's contributed. And even though you and I assume that now, we know that someone is always watching, students are still developing that ability to make good decisions and reason. So we want to make sure we tell them explicitly, I can see who posted and who posted what, and this is not the place to make inappropriate comments or post inappropriate things. So lastly, I want to show you two more examples of ways that you can use tools to collaborate online, and then I want to talk about participating in these collaborative exercises. All right, so this is a fun math problem. We have Maya who's hanging pictures on her walls. This assignment begins, as you can see underneath here, empty squares, which represent the picture frames, and then these triangles, which are nails, which go on the intersections so that you can show where the point is. I'm not a math teacher, so if my terminology is off, I'm sure you math teachers out there are catching that. So then the students label those, and then they hang their picture frame over the nail, and then they can collaboratively choose photographs to go in here. And this can be a fun way to let students work with each other on a standards-based problem that might otherwise just be a worksheet. And those can get old after a while, so it can be fun to have something like this. And let me show you one more. So this one is also from Lucid for Education. This is a Lucid Press template. This one is free and available to teachers. And here you can see that there's a template for a country report, and you could assign a particular country to 2 or 3 different students and assign them each a part. Template's already made, so for your students who may not have lots of support at home or tech-savvy parents, it's a great way to enable them to get in and participate without lots of help that you need, say, in something like Photoshop. And then it's all drag and drop, so not quite as complicated as using slides. And you can meet a lot of those standards that you may have been pushing towards with the end of the year coming and also have a fun collaborative experience for students when they come back. They could present on these, or they could even present using video. So that's another fun tool you can use to encourage collaboration. So last but definitely not least, I want to talk about you participating. Many times when students start using a new tool, and for many of you, these collaborative online tools or offline asynchronous tools will be new methods or tools. So we want you to participate and model what it looks like to be a good digital citizen and what it means to participate in the activity, what appropriate ways are to do that. Plus, it's a little bit fun. I used to worry about what my parents would think, what my students' parents would think when I participated with them in these activities, when I taught distance education, but I found that most of the time, either the parents didn't realize that it was me in there participating, or they thought it was awesome that I was in there with their kids helping. It can also be a great way to build engagement and continue those relationships you work so hard to build in the classroom while you're teaching asynchronously, or even synchronously without a webcam, when they can see you on there working. You can also leave comments on their work or suggest corrections, and that's another great way to build connection when you're far apart from each other. We already looked at those examples, so let's go now to the third tip I have for you, which is simplify and prioritize. I know that you hear this all the time in your regular professional developments, even when you're in the classroom as usual, but when you're teaching online, it's even more important. We want to think about these things. What must be retained to advance to the next skill or process? And if you're saying everything, which I know is the answer that most of us give, because it wouldn't be in the standard if it wasn't important, right? But everything isn't the answer. It's not possible to cover everything in a digital experience because you're not there to look over their shoulders and see what's going on. We can do a lot of things very well through virtual instruction, but it's important that we keep it simple so that we can conduct good observations and know what's going on. And then you also want to share with your at-home facilitators what you're teaching explicitly. So where you and I have been in education for a long time and we know how all of our lessons connect to the standards, our at-home facilitators, sometimes parents, sometimes brothers and sisters, sometimes the students themselves, if they're older, may not know exactly what we're teaching, and that can be helpful. I know in lots of schools we're already posting standards and objectives for students when we start a lesson, and this is just more of the same, but making sure it's very clear and explicit when we got started. I think the most important part of all of this is to trust yourself. You are an educator and you're the expert here. So if you feel like there are things that you can skip now that you're teaching online and that your student will be okay if they get these other core concepts, so you're going to spend more time there, trust yourself and do it. Reach out to your digital teaching and learning coaches or to your instructional coaches if you're a new teacher and you're not sure what to do, or reach out to veteran teachers and see if they can help you if you're not sure what to do there. All right, my fourth tip is to have fun. This is an adventure, and your students will look to you to see if this is an emergency or if it's an adventure. So dig in, have fun, make mistakes, try things that look interesting, and if it fails abysmally, laugh with your students about it. And just have joy in the trying of something new. If you are afraid of technology and maybe not super great at it, you may struggle just to create a presentation and share it through a webcam. And that's okay. Let your students know that you're learning, because you always told them that if they just tried, they would learn something and then they could do better the next time. So you can remind them that that's what you're doing as well. Okay, I hope this short webinar has been useful to you. Usually I'm a consultant and I go into schools and work with their teachers. But for right now, I am offering free, truly free consultations with teachers who are teaching from home for the first time. So you can contact me with a video or with the email that's here for a free video support And I'm happy to do that for anyone who needs it. For small groups of teachers, for one-on-one, I'll do as many as I can. And I think it will make a big difference for you if you're struggling. Thank you so much for what you do. I appreciate that you're the professionals out there taking care of our kids virtually while we work to get back to some kind of normal. Take care of yourselves out there, and I hope to hear from you.